Hi friends, welcome back. Today I have a new horror stories for you. But before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The stories will be told by Mr. X, so dim your light, pull up your blanket, and let's begin the stories.
My name is Elena, and this is something I experienced while living in Los Angeles. It wasn't a story passed down or something I heard from someone else. It happened directly to me, inside my own home. And it started in a way that felt ordinary enough to ignore. We moved into the house after my husband accepted a job offer that required us to relocate. The neighborhood was quiet, mostly families and older couples who had lived there for years. The house itself looked normal. Nothing about it felt haunted or strange at first. While unpacking, I went through the closet in what would become my daughter Lily's room. That was when I noticed the doll. It was sitting in the corner, facing outward, as if it had been intentionally placed there. It didn't look new. The porcelain face was smooth but aged, with painted eyes that reflected light strangely. The dress was clean, pale blue, and carefully pressed. I assumed it had been forgotten by the previous owners. We had been told the family left quickly, though no one explained why. I planned to throw it away later, but Lily saw it before I could move it. She picked it up immediately and carried it around the house for the rest of the day. That night, the doll stayed in Lily's room. I woke up early in the morning with a strange sense of unease. It wasn't fear, just discomfort, like something was out of place. When I checked on Lily, she was asleep, facing the wall. The doll was not beside her. It was sitting on a chair near the bed, positioned upright. I clearly remembered leaving it on the mattress earlier. I told myself it was nothing. Children move in their sleep. Objects fall. My mind was probably tired from the move. I returned to bed without touching the doll. That decision marked the beginning of everything. The changes didn't arrive suddenly. They slipped in slowly, quietly, blending into daily life so well that it took time to recognize them as something wrong. Lily became calmer than usual. She stopped throwing tantrums. She stopped asking for attention. At first, I thought she was simply adjusting to the new environment. She spent most of her time in her room, sitting with the doll placed neatly beside her. The way she handled it was careful, almost respectful. The doll was never treated like a toy. It was treated like a friend. I started noticing how often the doll changed locations. It was no longer limited to Lily's room. Sometimes it was on the couch, sometimes at the dining table, always positioned properly, never carelessly left behind. I assumed Lily was moving it, but there were moments when she hadn't left my sight. The atmosphere inside the house felt heavier, especially at night. Sounds from outside seemed distant, as if the walls were thicker than before. Even the lights felt dimmer, though nothing had changed electrically. What unsettled me the most was how Lily slowly pulled away from me. It didn't happen all at once. It happened quietly. She stopped reaching for my hand. She stopped reacting when I entered the room. Sometimes I would call her name and she wouldn't respond right away, as if her attention was somewhere else. It felt like she was listening to something I couldn't hear, something that didn't include me. My husband didn't notice anything wrong. To him, Lily was fine, quiet, calm, well-behaved. When I tried to explain what I was feeling, he brushed it off. He said I was tired. He said I was still affected by everything we had been through. He believed I was overthinking things. That made it worse. It made me feel alone inside my own house, like I was the only one watching something slowly change. I stopped talking about it after a while, not because the feeling went away, but because no one else seemed to see it. Even the house felt different. Family photos on the wall started to feel unfamiliar. I would look at them and feel uneasy, though nothing was clearly wrong. The faces were the same, the smiles were the same, but the warmth I used to feel when I looked at them was gone. It felt like I was looking at memories that no longer belonged to us. I couldn't explain it. Nothing had changed in a way I could point to, but every day it felt more like something was quietly taking its place in our family, something that looked the same, lived the same, and stayed close enough that no one else noticed, except me. The doll was never far from those moments. Even when I didn't see it, I felt its presence. And deep down, without ever saying it out loud, I began to feel like the house itself was changing, not adjusting to us as a family, but to something else, something that had already decided it belonged there. A few weeks after things settled, Lily asked if she could invite some of her school friends over. It sounded normal. I took it as a good sign. I thought maybe she was finally adjusting, becoming social again, acting like the child she used to be. I agreed. I told myself that having more people in the house would help, that laughter and movement would make the place feel lighter, that whatever heaviness I felt would fade once the house was filled with familiar voices again. At the time, it felt like the right decision. That Saturday afternoon, 4 of Lily's friends came over. The living room was filled with movement, shoes left near the door, laughter echoing softly through the hallway. For the first time in a while, the house felt alive again. I stayed in the kitchen, preparing snacks, occasionally checking on them from a distance. They decided to play hide and seek. It was innocent. Children running from room to room, counting near the stairs, hiding behind curtains, inside closets, under beds. I watched for a while, making sure no one went outside or into places they shouldn't. What caught my attention was how Lily didn't run like the others. She walked, almost like she already knew where everyone was hiding. The doll was sitting on the couch, facing the hallway, unmoving. At some point, the noise shifted. The laughter softened. Footsteps became hesitant. I noticed 2 of the girls standing close together near the hallway, their expressions uneasy. One of the boys refused to go upstairs again after hiding there once. I asked if everything was okay. They nodded, but their eyes avoided mine. The game ended early. The children gathered their things faster than expected. Their parents arrived sooner than planned. One by one, they left, quieter than when they came. I brushed it off as kids getting tired, though something about their behavior lingered in my mind. Later that evening, one of the mothers messaged me. She said her daughter had been unusually quiet after coming home. She mentioned something about a doll watching from the end of the hallway during the game. I didn't reply. That night, Lily's room felt different. The door was slightly open. The light inside was off. The doll was no longer on the couch. I found it standing inside Lily's closet, facing outward. Over the next few days, the invitations stopped. Lily didn't ask to have friends over again. I thought maybe the hide-and-seek game had scared them, or maybe parents were just busy. Then I started noticing the looks. When I dropped Lily off at school, other children avoided her. Parents smiled politely at me but didn't linger. One afternoon, another mother approached me carefully. She mentioned that her child had complained about Lily during the playdate. Not about fighting or being mean, but about how Lily didn't feel like herself. She said her child felt watched while hiding. She said Lily stood too close to the closets. There was a moment during the game when Lily wasn't the one searching, but still appeared behind someone who had been hiding alone. I tried to explain it away. Kids exaggerate. Fear spreads easily among them. But the words stayed with me. At home, Lily spent more time sitting still. She no longer asked permission to do things. She simply did them. She moved through the house confidently, like she knew every corner better than I did. The doll started showing up in more places around the house. It wasn't just in Lily's room or on the couch anymore. Sometimes it sat at the dining table, neatly placed on a chair. Sometimes it was near the bathroom door, always facing inside, as if it was watching the house. I started noticing the family photos again. This time, I couldn't ignore it. Lily's posture looked different in the pictures. Her expression was more neutral, almost blank. In one photo, the doll seemed closer to her than I remembered, almost in the center. It made me uneasy, but I didn't know how to explain it. Everything looked normal, yet nothing felt right. My husband still didn't see it. He said stress was getting to me. He said moving, parenting, and city life were catching up. But I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in the way the house felt heavier, in the way Lily moved, in the way the doll seemed to always be watching. Something was not right, even if he couldn't see it. That afternoon, the house was quiet in a way that didn't feel right. The sun was still out, light coming in through the windows, but the air inside felt closed and heavy. I had just finished folding laundry when I realized how long Lily's room had been silent. I walked toward her door without really thinking about it. I didn't have a reason, just a feeling pulling me there. The closer I got, the clearer it became. I could hear Lily's voice. It wasn't loud, it wasn't playful. It was calm and steady, the kind of tone adults use when they are focused on something important. She wasn't talking to herself. I knew that much. I stood outside the door for a moment, just listening. Lily was sitting on the floor, facing the doll. The doll was upright, placed right in front of her. Lily's posture was straight, her hands resting on her knees. She moved her head slightly, like she was listening and responding to something. She was calling the doll by a name. Ella. The way she said it sounded formal, almost respectful, like she was speaking to someone older than her. I stepped into the room, making sure she noticed me. Lily turned her head slowly. Her expression didn't change. There was no surprise, no fear of being caught doing something she shouldn't. The doll remained facing her. I asked Lily what she was doing. She answered right away, without hesitation. She said she was talking to Ella because Ella understood things better than I did. She said Ella helped her remember things. Things about the house. Things about the family. That was the first time real fear hit me. Kids make up stories all the time, but they don't usually speak with such certainty. Lily sounded certain. I took the doll and placed it on the bed, telling Lily it was time to stop playing. Her eyes followed the doll, not me. The moment I touched it, I felt a strange resistance, like I was interrupting something that wasn't finished. That night, Lily refused to sleep unless the doll was in the room. I didn't argue. After that day, Lily changed faster. She started copying my habits, the way I folded clothes, the way I organized the kitchen counter, the way I sat quietly in the living room during the evenings. At first, I thought she was just mimicking me, like children often do. But it felt deliberate, like practice. Her handwriting improved suddenly. Her manners became unnaturally polite. Teachers praised her behavior, saying she seemed more mature, more focused. They said it like it was a good thing. At home, Lily began positioning the doll in places where family moments happened, near the dining table during meals, on the couch during movie nights, always facing us, always included. Family photos continued to change. In newer ones, Lily stood slightly apart from us. In older ones, her smile looked unfamiliar. The doll appeared more often, sometimes reflected in glass or mirrors, always close to Lily. Lily began correcting small things around the house, the placement of objects, the routine of meals, even the tone I used when speaking. It felt like the role of the daughter was slowly being rewritten. And Ella was learning, because one night, while watching Lily sleep, I felt an overwhelming sense that the child in that bed was practicing how to stay, and the doll was waiting for its turn. The night everything changed started quietly. Lily had gone to bed like usual, the doll resting beside her pillow. I hesitated before turning off the light, feeling that familiar weight settle in my chest. But I was too tired, so I left her room the way I always did. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to movement near my bed. Lily was standing there. She wasn't crying loudly or panicking. Her breathing was shallow. Her face looked pale under the dim light, and her hands were clenched tightly at her sides. When I reached out to her, she flinched before letting me touch her. That alone told me something was wrong. She showed me her arm. There were thin red marks on her skin, shallow but clear, like scratches made by something small and sharp. They weren't there earlier that night. I knew that for sure. Lily's body was shaking. She tried to explain what had happened while she was sleeping. Her words were jumbled, but one thing was clear. She didn't feel safe in her own room anymore. She didn't want the doll near her. She wanted to stay with me. I pulled her into bed without hesitation. She curled against me, gripping my shirt as if afraid I might disappear. It took a long time for her breathing to slow. Even then, she kept waking up, checking the room, checking the shadows. That night, Lily slept facing me, her back turned to the rest of the room. And for the first time since we moved into that house, I felt like I had my daughter back. I didn't sleep at all. When morning came, Lily was still asleep in my bed. Her face looked softer than it had in weeks. Younger. Like herself again. I waited until I was sure she wouldn't wake before getting up. The house felt tense, like it was holding its breath. I walked down the hallway toward Lily's room. Every step felt heavier the closer I got. The door was half open. Inside, the doll was exactly where I had left it the night before, lying beside Lily's pillow. Seeing it there made my stomach turn. I didn't hesitate. I picked it up carefully, keeping my distance, avoiding its face. The porcelain felt colder than the room, heavier than it should have been. I carried it out without looking back and found an empty cardboard box in the storage room. I placed the doll inside and closed the lid. For a moment, I stood there, staring at the box, waiting for something to happen. I pushed the box into the back of the storage space, behind old blankets and unused items. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I would figure out what to do later. What mattered was keeping Lily safe. When I returned to my bedroom, Lily was awake. She watched me closely, as if trying to read my face. I lay back down beside her, reassuring her with my presence alone. She relaxed slowly, though she kept glancing toward the door. The rest of the day passed strangely calm. Lily stayed close to me. She laughed a little, ate normally. But there was something else beneath it all. A sense that the house noticed what I had done. That evening, when I walked past the storage room, I stopped because the door was slightly open, and the box was no longer where I had left it. I froze for a moment, my heart racing. Slowly, I stepped closer, but the box was empty. The doll was gone. I checked every corner of the room, on shelves, on the floor, even behind other boxes. It wasn't there. My hands shook, and I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. Somehow, I knew it hadn't just moved on its own. A few days passed without incident. Lily stayed close to me, rarely leaving my side. She slept in my room every night. The scratches on her arm faded, but the fear stayed. I could see it in the way her eyes scanned the room before resting, in the way her body tensed whenever the house creaked. I decided to clean the living room that afternoon, hoping routine might bring back some sense of normalcy. The television was on, playing softly in the background, more for noise than anything else. I moved slowly, wiping the shelves, straightening the cushions, and avoiding the storage room completely. When I turned toward the couch, my breath caught. The doll was sitting on the armchair. It was positioned perfectly upright, facing the television. Its head was tilted slightly upward, as if watching. Its hands rested neatly on its lap. There was no box, no lid, no sign of how it got there. For a moment, my mind refused to process what I was seeing. I stood frozen, cloth still in my hand, heart pounding so hard it felt loud in my ears. The room hadn't made a sound. The doll looked settled, comfortable, like it had been there for a while. I turned off the television immediately. The silence that followed felt heavy. I didn't touch the doll. I backed away slowly and went to find Lily. She was in my bedroom, sitting on the bed, drawing quietly. She looked up when I entered, her expression cautious but calm. I asked her if she had moved the doll. The answer came quickly and clearly. She hadn't been near it. She hadn't gone into the living room. She didn't want anything to do with it anymore. Her fear was genuine. There was no confusion in her face. Whatever was moving the doll, it wasn't Lily. After that moment, the house no longer felt like ours. I started locking doors during the day, something I'd never done before. I avoided leaving Lily alone, even for short moments. The doll stayed in the living room. No matter how many times I moved it back into the storage space, it always returned. Sometimes closer than before. My husband still didn't see it. He noticed the doll, of course, but not the way it appeared or how it moved. To him, it was just a toy being misplaced. He didn't understand why I was so tense, why Lily refused to sleep in her own room, why I insisted on keeping lights on at night. The gap between what I knew and what he believed seemed to grow wider with each passing day. Lily grew quieter again, but this time it wasn't like before. This time it was fear-driven. She jumped at small sounds. She refused to walk down the hallway alone. She flinched whenever she saw the doll, even from across the room. I noticed new marks on the walls near Lily's room, thin lines on the paint. I told myself it was just old damage I hadn't noticed before. I didn't want to admit what it looked like. That night, while sitting in the living room with Lily asleep beside me, I felt a sudden certainty settle in my chest. The doll wasn't trying to scare us anymore. It was testing how far it could go, how much space it could take. From that day on, I stopped trying to convince myself that this was just stress or imagination. What was happening inside that house had a pattern, and patterns don't come from coincidence. The doll began appearing closer to Lily again, not aggressively, just slowly reclaiming space. One morning it was near the hallway. Another day it was sitting at the edge of the living room rug, always positioned neatly, always facing inward, as if observing the rhythm of the house. Lily noticed it too. Her body language changed whenever the doll was nearby. Her shoulders stiffened. Her steps became careful. She stayed close to me, often holding onto my sleeve without realizing it. She no longer showed the confidence she had when the doll was influencing her before. Instead, she looked like a child trying to stay unseen. I started to feel the same way. The house didn't feel neutral anymore. Sounds echoed differently. Some rooms felt warmer, others colder. The hallway to Lily's room seemed narrower than before, even though nothing had actually changed. One afternoon, while sorting old photos on my phone, I noticed something unsettling. In the newer pictures, Lily's expressions were inconsistent. Some photos showed her smiling naturally, others showed a flat, unfamiliar look. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lily was lying next to me, her soft breaths brushing against my side, one arm tucked close. I watched her chest rise and fall, reminding myself that she was still here, still mine. But the fear didn't go away. I started thinking about the way Lily had changed before she became afraid, how calm she had been. At the time, I thought she was growing up too fast. Now I understood something else had been guiding her. The doll was trying to take her place. The realization settled in slowly, like a weight pressing down on my chest. Everything made sense then. The copying, the observing, the way Lily had started behaving like an adult instead of a child, the way the doll always positioned itself during family moments. It wasn't attached to Lily emotionally. It was studying her, learning how to exist within the family without being questioned. And when Lily stopped cooperating, when fear broke whatever control the doll had over her, that was when the scratches appeared. That was when patience turned into force. I realized then that locking the doll away wasn't enough. Ignoring it wasn't enough. Throwing it away wasn't enough. And waiting was the worst choice of all, because the house was no longer just a place. Something inside it was getting ready to fully take my daughter's place. I realized I couldn't fight this alone anymore. Whatever was happening inside that house had already gone beyond fear. My husband needed to see it with his own eyes. I installed small CCTV cameras in almost every corner of the house. The living room, the hallway, Lily's room, the storage area, even the dining space. I didn't tell my husband at first. I just said I wanted extra security, something normal for a city like Los Angeles. For 2 days, nothing happened. The doll stayed still. It remained seated in the living room, positioned neatly on a chair, as if it knew it was being watched. Lily stayed close to me, barely leaving my side. I started doubting myself again, wondering if I had pushed things too far. Then, on the third night, the cameras recorded everything. I checked the footage early in the morning, while the house was still quiet. At first, the recordings looked normal. Empty rooms, still furniture. Then, in the living room feed, something changed. The doll moved. It stood up on its own, slowly, It turned its head toward the hallway. Then, it walked. Each step was steady, controlled, almost careful. It stopped in front of Lily's room and stood there for several minutes before returning to the chair, sitting down exactly the way it had been before. I felt sick. When my husband came home that evening, I showed him the footage. I didn't explain, I just let him watch. I saw the moment his face changed, the moment logic failed him. He watched the clip again and again in silence. After my husband watched the footage, the atmosphere in the house changed completely. It felt exposed, like something had been cornered and was angry about it. The doll no longer stayed still for the cameras. It moved with intention. The recording showed it shifting its position whenever it knew it was being filmed, always facing the camera, always perfectly centered. In some clips, it stood too close, its face filling the frame, eyes reflecting the lens unnaturally. In one recording, Lily was asleep in my bed, yet the doll was seen standing beside her empty bed, smoothing the sheets, adjusting the pillow, preparing the space. That was the moment my husband broke. He finally understood that this wasn't about imagination, stress, or fear. Something was actively trying to replace our daughter. We planned to leave immediately, but the house reacted faster. That night, the cameras began shutting off one by one. They simply stopped recording. The final active camera was the one in the hallway. It showed the doll standing there, facing the bedroom door. After my husband finally believed me, the house felt different again, like something inside it knew it had been exposed and was adjusting its approach. The doll started showing up in places it had never been before: the kitchen counter, the laundry machine, once sitting on the edge of the bathtub, always positioned as if it belonged there. Lily barely spoke anymore. When she did, her voice was small, hesitant. She stayed in my room constantly. She slept lightly, waking at the smallest sound. Sometimes she stared at the door for long periods, like she was listening for something approaching. The CCTV cameras began malfunctioning again. Short gaps, skip seconds. Angles changed slightly on their own. My husband tried to fix them, replacing cables, resetting systems. Nothing worked for long. One night, the power went out. Not the whole neighborhood, just our house. The moment the lights died, the air shifted. It felt heavy. We gathered in the bedroom, holding Lily between us. The silence pressed in from all sides. When the power returned, the doll was sitting at the foot of the bed. None of us had moved. My husband grabbed it and threw it into the hallway without thinking. The sound of porcelain hitting the floor was dull. It didn't crack. It didn't break. We tried to get rid of it in every way that made sense. We threw it into trash bins miles away. It was back the next morning, sitting on the living room chair like nothing had happened. We left it at a public landfill. It returned, clean and untouched. We locked it inside a sealed container and buried it beneath heavy items in the garage. It appeared again, this time placed closer to Lily's room. Each attempt felt like an invitation for it to come back stronger. The house reacted every time we tried. Lights flickered, doors slammed without force. The air grew heavy, pressing against our chests. Lily's fear deepened. She stopped sleeping through the night. She flinched even when I moved too quickly. That was when my husband finally said we needed help. We contacted a priest recommended by someone my husband knew from work. He didn't ask many questions over the phone. He only asked to see the object. We didn't bring the doll directly from the house. We were afraid it would return before we reached him. My husband wrapped it in thick cloth. We didn't look at its face. We didn't speak during the drive. The priest didn't touch the doll immediately. He observed it from a distance. His expression shifted in a way that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't unfamiliar to him. He told us the doll had to be removed from the house completely, removed and contained properly. We handed it over. For the first time since we moved in, the house felt lighter, but the relief didn't last long. Because when we returned home that evening, Lily refused to step inside. She stood frozen at the doorway, staring down the hallway, and she shook her head. I held her close, whispering that it was okay, that we were here together. We didn't hear from the priest for 2 days. Those 2 days were the quietest the house had ever been. No movement. No shifting objects. No pressure in the air. Lily slept longer than she had in weeks, though she still stayed close to me, refusing to be alone in any room. On the 3rd day, the priest called. He sounded exhausted. He told us that the doll couldn't stay with him. He had tried prayers, containment rituals, and isolation. None of it worked. The doll didn't react violently, didn't resist in any obvious way. It simply remained unchanged. And the longer it stayed, the heavier the atmosphere in his own space became. He said this was not something that attached itself randomly. It was tied to the house and to the family inside it. By the time he arrived to return the doll, his hands were shaking. He didn't step inside. He left it at the front door, wrapped tightly, and advised us not to bring it back in. Then he gave us one final suggestion. Find the first owner of the house. Not the family who sold it to us, but the original owner. The one who had lived there when the house was first built. According to him, whatever was bound to the doll began there. That night, the doll reappeared inside the house on its own, seated in the living room, as if returning had always been inevitable. Finding the history of the house took longer than expected. Records were old, names changed hands, but eventually, through property documents and quiet inquiries, we found the name of the first owner, a woman. She was still alive. She lived outside Los Angeles, in a quiet town far from the city. When we contacted her, she hesitated at first. Then she agreed to talk. When we met her, I understood why she had left. Her body was frail, but her eyes were sharp, like someone who had spent a lifetime waiting for something to return. She told us the story slowly. The doll belonged to her daughter, her only child. The girl had been sick for most of her early life. Confined to bed, the doll was given to her to keep her company. It was handmade, customized to look like the child herself. Same hair color, same face shape, same size proportions. When the girl passed away, the woman couldn't let go. She kept the doll close and talked to it, treated it as if her daughter was still there. Over time, she noticed changes. The doll began appearing in places she didn't remember leaving it. The house felt heavier. Her own memories started blurring. She said there were days when she couldn't remember if her daughter was alive or gone. That was when she realized the doll wasn't just holding memories. It was learning how to stay. She moved away, left the house, left the doll behind. Hearing that, my chest tightened, because the doll didn't follow her. It waited for another family, for another daughter, for another chance to take a place it believed was meant for it. Finally, we found the final solution. I realized it at the moment hope left me and was replaced by emptiness. Every option had been tried. Every logical explanation collapsed into the same truth. The doll could not be destroyed, and it could not be removed from our lives for good. No matter where we took it, no matter how far, it always came back. It simply returned, sitting somewhere in the house as if it had never left. The story of the first owner was the missing piece. The doll was never meant to be a toy. It was created as a substitute, a presence meant to keep a dying child from feeling alone. When the child died, the doll didn't lose its purpose. It inherited it. The decision itself was simple, but the meaning behind it was terrifying. The doll had to be reunited with the grave of the child it was made for, buried together, as if returning a part that had been separated for far too long. We drove to the cemetery in silence. It was an old burial ground. The paths were uneven, the stones cracked and worn. Many names were barely readable. Trees stood too close together, their branches overlapping, blocking most of the light even during the day. I felt the pressure the moment I stepped out of the car. It wasn't fear, not the kind that makes you run. My body wasn't tense. Instead, my awareness sharpened without my control. Every sound, every small movement, every breath felt too clear, too close. My thoughts slowed, stretched thin. The grave was small, smaller than I expected. The ground was opened carefully. I stood a few steps back, holding the wrapped doll tightly against my chest. Even through the layers of cloth, I felt it. As the hole grew deeper, the pressure in my head tightened. My vision blurred at the edges, darkening slightly, as if the world itself was closing in. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, dehydration, anything reasonable. I didn't want to admit it might be the doll reacting. When the grave was ready, I stepped forward. The moment I leaned over, the world shifted. The doll was gone from my arms. In its place was Lily. My daughter lay at the bottom of the grave. Her body was twisted unnaturally, her small hands half buried in dirt, fingers curled as if they had tried to claw their way free. Soil smeared her cheeks. Her hair was tangled and heavy with earth. One of her eyes was open, unfocused, staring straight at me. I felt something tear inside my chest. My lungs refused to work properly. My knees weakened, and I nearly collapsed forward before my husband caught my arm. My mind screamed one thought over and over again. I tried to move toward the grave. My body leaned forward despite my husband's grip tightening. Every instinct told me to reach down, to pull Lily out, to undo whatever nightmare this was. Then everything snapped back. The doll was there again, lowered carefully into the grave. I gasped violently. Tears streamed down my face, but I didn't remember crying. My head throbbed, pain radiating behind my eyes. My heart beat loud and uneven. I knew then. The doll wanted to see how easily my mind could be turned against itself. The burial continued. Soil covered the doll slowly, layer by layer, until nothing remained visible. When the grave was sealed, the air shifted. The pressure lifted abruptly, leaving behind a strange lightness that felt unnatural in its own way. I grabbed my husband's arm, my hands shaking uncontrollably. We needed to leave. We needed to get Lily. I didn't explain. I only knew that every second we stayed away from our daughter felt like an irreversible mistake. The drive felt longer than it should have. I watched the road without really seeing it. My thoughts replayed the image of Lily in the grave over and over again, each time sharper, more detailed. I tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination, a psychological attack, something born from exhaustion and fear. When we reached my mother-in-law's house, I felt a brief sense of relief. The place looked normal, safe. Lights on, curtains open, nothing out of place. Lily ran toward us when we arrived. At first glance, she looked exactly the same. Same height, same hair, same clothes. I dropped to my knees and pulled my daughter into a tight embrace, holding her longer than necessary. Lily hugged me back, her arms firm, almost deliberate. There was no hesitation, but there was also no warmth rushing through me the way there usually was. When I pulled away, I studied Lily's face closely. Her expression was calm, composed in a way that felt wrong for a child who hadn't seen her parents in days. Her eyes were steady, unblinking for just a second too long. Her grandmother said Lily had been unusually quiet, well-behaved. She slept through the night without asking for comfort. She didn't talk about the doll, didn't mention the house, didn't show fear. I smiled weakly and nodded, but I felt something was off. That night, Lily sat quietly in the back seat as we drove home. She didn't ask where we had been. She simply watched the road ahead through the windshield, her posture straight, her hands resting neatly in her lap. I glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. For a brief moment, it didn't match my movements. I blinked hard, and the reflection corrected itself. I told myself I was imagining things, but when we arrived home, Lily walked inside without hesitation. She didn't pause. She didn't look around. She didn't react to the space she had once been afraid of. It was as if she already knew exactly where everything belonged. That night, I stayed in the doorway longer than I intended. Lily slept quietly, her chest rising and falling in a slow rhythm. Her face looked peaceful. There were no signs of fear. Everything about her seemed normal. The exhaustion of the past weeks had settled deep into my bones. The constant fear, the pressure, the images I couldn't erase from my mind, they had to be affecting my perception. Anyone in my position would see things that weren't there. Anyone would feel unsettled after everything I had been through. I watched Lily a little longer, waiting for something to confirm the unease. I couldn't explain. She didn't stir. She didn't mutter in her sleep. She didn't cry out. Her hands remained neatly folded at her sides, her fingers relaxed and unmoving. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the house settling around us. I stepped inside quietly and adjusted the blanket, pulling it higher over Lily's chest. Her skin felt warm beneath my fingers. That was enough. I turned off the light and closed the door gently behind me. In the following days, life slowly returned to something that looked normal. Lily followed routines without resistance. She ate when asked, she slept when told. She listened carefully, and I took it as a sign that the fear had passed. There were small changes. Lily stopped asking questions she used to ask. She no longer called out for comfort at night. She could sit alone for long periods of time, perfectly still, watching nothing in particular. When I checked on her, she would look up slowly, already aware of my presence. I told myself my daughter was simply growing up. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about the doll, about the grave, the soil, and the moment the ground closed over it, a small feeling of unease would come up, but I'd quickly shake it off, telling myself it was just my memory playing tricks. After all, the doll was gone, and Lily was safe, sleeping under our roof, breathing softly in the next room. I never noticed when Lily began to sit in the same position the doll once did. I never questioned why she sometimes stared at empty spaces for long stretches of time, unmoving and unblinking. I believed my daughter was safe. I never knew that Lily was no longer Lily anymore. Something else had come home with us. I wanted to call someone, a priest, a specialist, anyone, but I couldn't. I felt trapped, like admitting it out loud would make it all real in front of everyone. The house grew quieter. Shadows felt heavier. The doll's presence that had once been outside of her was now completely inside her. We had buried it, thinking it would end the terror, but instead, it had fully merged with Lily. I could no longer touch her without feeling a cold resistance. I could no longer hear her laugh without a shiver running down my spine. And the worst part? I couldn't make anyone else see it. Even after everything, Lily was still here. Her small hands, her soft voice, her little laugh, they were still hers. I could see it, feel it, even if something inside me whispered that things had changed forever. I wanted to fight it. I wanted to reject what had happened, to separate her from the terror I had seen. But she was real. She was still Lily. And no matter what had happened with the doll, no matter what tricks my mind had played on me, she was here, alive, in front of me. So I stopped questioning. I stopped trying to find answers I would never get. I just held her, letting the rhythm of her breathing remind me of who she was. The house was quiet. The shadows didn't move like they had before. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe, at least for a moment, that maybe we could live with this. That maybe we could accept it and move on. I didn't know if it was right. I didn't know if it was safe. But I also knew that there was nothing else I could do. Lily was here, and somehow, that had to be enough.